All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are launching into a deep dive that's truly out of this world. We're talking U.S. Space Force, AI surveillance.
Hmm.
And hold on to your helmets, because we're also going to tackle some pretty wild theories about missions to Mars.
Sounds like a fascinating mix.
Yeah, we've got a real smorgasbord of sources for this one, starting with official documents
Yeah.
straight from Space Force HQ. We'll also be looking at some recent news articles.
Okay.
And to spice things up, let's just say we've got a rather passionate Rumble video in the mix as well.
Well, having diverse viewpoints is always helpful.
Absolutely. It lets us see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So let's start with the U.S. Space Force. When I first heard about it, I'll be honest, I thought, okay, is this a new sci-fi movie or something?
Right.
But then I dug into the CRS report in the Space Force's own strategic overview, and I realized this is serious business.
Oh, it is. It's a significant development
Yeah.
and relatively new, too. Officially established in 2019 under the Department of the Air Force. Their mission is crystal clear. Protect U.S. interests in space, deter attacks, and be ready to defend against any threats that come their way.
And get this, they've structured it much like the Navy Marine Corps, which, when you think about the vastness of space and the need for coordinated action, makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, it does.
But it does make you wonder about, how that structure will work in such a rapidly evolving and honestly kind of undefined realm like space.
It's a good point. That kind of hierarchical structure, while effective in traditional branches, might face some unique challenges in the dynamic world of space.
For sure. And speaking of unique, did you know they call their personnel guardians? Guardians?
I have heard that.
I mean, combat. That's straight out of a comic book.
It definitely has a certain, I don't know, certain flair to it.
It does. But beyond the cool name, what really struck me when I was looking at their website is the sheer variety of career paths they have.
Yeah, it's not just about astronauts and rocket scientists.
Exactly. I mean, they've got everything. You could be an acquisition manager, an intelligence analyst, even financial management.
Financial management?
Yeah, they're building a whole workforce, whole infrastructure
Yeah, it's
to
fast.
support those space operations from every angle.
It makes you think that, this isn't just about launching rockets. It's about establishing a whole economic and logistical structure in space. Almost like setting up a new country, but on a different planet.
Whoa, yeah, that is mind-blowing. And get this, even civilians can join the Space Force.
Wow, that's interesting.
I know, right? It's not just for military personnel.
Really speaks to the comprehensive nature of their vision.
It does. And don't even get me started on the training and benefits, especially the educational opportunities. Anyone listening who's looking for a career that's truly out of this world might want to check that out. All right, so switching gears a bit now to something a bit more, shall we say, grounded. Remember that Rumble video we talked about?
Oh.
Well, it drops this bombshell about a potential deployment of 100,000 NATO troops to Ukraine as a peacekeeping force. I mean, 100,000 troops.
That's a significant number.
It is. So I dug a little deeper and found a couple news articles, one from Newsweek and one from Breitbart. And they both mention this possible troop buildup.
Okay.
But the Breitbart article also includes a, let's just say, stern warning from Putin about this escalating into a major conflict.
I see. So the situation is quite tense then.
Yeah, it feels like we're on the edge of something big, and the stakes are incredibly high.
It certainly highlights the reality of that great power competition, which the Space Force documents actually emphasize as a major concern, especially with regard to, China's growing presence in space.
So is space becoming the new battleground for global dominance? Is that where the Space Force comes in? To protect U.S. interests in this new kind of scary arena?
It's a question that deserves serious consideration. This Space Force's mission to deter attacks and defend U.S. interests in space is directly relevant to this rising geopolitical tension. And it brings us back to that structure we were talking about earlier, If space truly becomes the next major theater of conflict, will that hierarchical structure of the Space Force be an asset or a liability? Will they be able to adapt quickly enough to the unpredictable nature of space warfare?
That's a really good question. And speaking of unpredictable, this Rumble video goes down a pretty fascinating rabbit hole. It claims that Elon Musk's family history of archaeology is somehow tied to a secret mission to Mars to find ancient civilizations.
Now, that's a fascinating theory.
Yeah, it's a little out there, I know. But
Ah.
what is a fact, and this is straight from the BC Begley segment in that Rumble video, is that the Space Force is actually using a robot dog. Like right now.
A robot dog.
The robot dog in space. It's like they're taking inspiration from science fiction or something.
It certainly blurs the lines between what we used to think was impossible and what's happening right now.
It really does. And it shows just how much technology, especially AI, is being integrated into space operations.
Which brings with it, both positive and potentially concerning implications.
Okay, so hold on tight because this is where things get even more interesting. We're going from robot dogs to DeepSeek. The Rumble video mentions a movie called Dreamscape, which I'm guessing is about dreams.
Yes, it involves manipulating dreams.
Oh, okay.
And the video draws this parallel to an AI system called DeepSeek, which is discussed in a couple of other Rumble videos, Joe Bot and Man in America.
Okay, so what exactly is DeepSeek?
From what I gathered, it's described as an AI system designed to analyze massive amounts of data, including personal information, to understand and predict human behavior.
Wait, predict human behavior.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds a little creepy. Like, what does that even look like in practice? Could it predict when someone's about to commit a crime? Or even, like, predict how someone might vote?
Those are interesting questions.
That's some powerful and potentially scary stuff.
It definitely raises some serious ethical considerations about privacy, autonomy, and the potential for misuse.
Absolutely.
The question is, where does helpful data analysis end and intrusive surveillance begin?
Exactly. And how does this all tie back to the Space Force?
That's a crucial point to consider. If we connect this to the Space Force's intelligence gathering capabilities, it does make you wonder what role they might play in this evolving landscape of AI surveillance. Do they have analysts who are trained to work with systems like DeepSeek? Are they using this technology to monitor potential threats? Or could it be used for something more intrusive?
Those are some heavy questions. And this Rumble video, it really doesn't shy away from making some bold claims.
Yeah.
There's talk about Trump supposedly locating trafficked children, and even allegations about the Archbishop of D.C. being involved in some kind of Vatican cover-up. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And while we explore these topics, it's crucial to remember that just because something is presented in a video or an article doesn't automatically make it true. It's important to maintain a healthy skepticism, to consider the sources, and do your own research to form your own informed opinions.
This is why I love these deep dives. We get to dig into these complex topics and explore different perspectives. Even if they are a little out there sometimes, it makes you think critically about what you're hearing and seeing. But hold on. Because we've only just scratched the surface, we'll be back in part 2 to delve even deeper into the Space Force and the implications of AI surveillance. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the U.S. Space Force, AI's growing role, and some of the more, shall we say, provocative claims we've encountered.
Okay, so we left off on a cliffhanger with those claims from that Rumble video, and I'm ready to unpack them a bit further. Let's start with that one about Trump supposedly being involved in a mission to locate trafficked children. It cites a Gateway Pundit article as evidence. So what can you tell us about that article?
Well, that Gateway Pundit article does report on that claim, suggesting that the Trump administration successfully located a large number of missing migrant children. However, and this is crucial, the article doesn't present any hard evidence. It leans heavily on anonymous sources, and it doesn't offer official documentation to back up that claim.
So it's kind of like he said, she said then.
Yeah, exactly. That's a classic example of why it's so important to consider the source and any potential biases when evaluating claims like this.
Good point. And then there's that allegation about the Archbishop of D.C. and a supposed Vatican sex abuse cover-up. That's some pretty heavy stuff. What's the story there?
Yeah, so the Times of San Diego article that you shared does mention the Archbishop and those allegations. The focus is on objections raised by attorneys representing alleged victims of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church. These attorneys argue that the Archbishop's appointment raises serious concerns about transparency and accountability.
So there are legitimate questions being raised, but it's not necessarily a smoking gun.
Precisely. It's important to clarify that these are allegations at this point. The article highlights the concerns and perspectives of those involved in the legal proceedings, but it doesn't present conclusive proof of a cover-up.
Okay, so it's more about ongoing investigations than proven facts, which is a good reminder that we need to be cautious about jumping to conclusions based on limited information.
Absolutely. Critical thinking and evaluating sources from multiple perspectives are essential, especially when dealing with potentially sensitive topics like this.
All right, well, we've got these claims swirling around: Trump, trafficking, the Vatican. It's a lot to process for sure. But let's shift gears back to the Space Force for a bit. We've talked about their mission, their structure, even their robot dog. But what about their approach to planning for the future? I mean, space is constantly changing. There are so many unknowns.
That's where the Space Force Doctrine publication on planning becomes really insightful. It provides a fascinating glimpse into how they think about navigating the complexities of space operations.
Okay, give us the inside scoop. What are some key takeaways from that document?
One of the most striking aspects is their emphasis on anticipating unexpected outcomes. They openly acknowledge that the space domain is constantly evolving, with new technologies emerging all the time, and potential adversaries developing their own strategies.
Yeah, but how do you plan for something that you don't even know is going to happen? It feels like trying to predict the future.
It's definitely a challenge, but they advocate for a flexible and adaptive planning process that can adjust to unforeseen circumstances. They even use the phrase planning for dynamic situations.
So they're not just reacting to threats, they're trying to stay ahead of the curve. It's like they're playing a game of chess, but on a cosmic scale.
That's a great analogy. They also stress the importance of integrated planning. And they're not just talking about involving various military branches. They want to bring in other government agencies, international partners, even commercial space entities.
Why is it so important to involve all those different players?
Well, because space is no longer solely a military domain. With the growing presence of commercial satellites, international space programs, and the potential for private space exploration, it's a much more complex and interconnected environment.
It's kind of like the Wild West out there, with all these different players staking their claims.
In a way, yes. And the Space Force recognizes the need for collaboration and coordination to prevent conflicts and ensure the responsible use of space.
So they're embracing a more holistic approach to space operations. It's not just about national security, it's about global cooperation and responsible space exploration.
That's right. They emphasize the need to consider the broader implications of actions in space, including potential consequences for international relations, economic stability, and even environmental sustainability.
Yeah, this is blowing my mind a little bit. It's clear that the Space Force is thinking big, not just about rockets and satellites, but about the future of humanity's relationship with space. But before we get too lost in the stars, let's bring it back down to Earth for a moment. Remember DeepSeek, that AI system we were discussing earlier?
Yes, the system designed to analyze data to understand and predict human behavior.
Right. The Rumble video raised some serious concerns about its potential for intrusive surveillance.
Yeah.
So, how do those concerns align with what we're learning about the Space Force's approach to intelligence gathering?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a topic we'll dive into even deeper in our next segment, along with some final thoughts on the implications of all of these advancements for the future we're creating.
I'm already on the edge of my seat. Don't go anywhere, listeners. We'll be right back. We're back for the final part of our deep dive, and things are about to get really interesting. We've covered the Space Force, AI surveillance, and how those two seem to be blurring the lines between what we used to think was science fiction and what's happening right now.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the future, doesn't it?
It does, and not always in a good way. I mean, we talked about some of the potential downsides of AI, especially when it comes to surveillance. But what about the flip side? Are there benefits to integrating AI into space operations?
Oh, absolutely. AI has the potential to really enhance what they can do.
Like how?
Well, for one, it can drastically improve situational awareness by processing and analyzing huge amounts of data from satellites and other sensors.
Okay.
It can spot patterns and anomalies that human analysts might miss.
So it's like having an extra set of eyes, constantly watching over everything happening in space.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. It's like having a superpowered brain helping to monitor everything.
That's pretty impressive, but how would that actually play out in a real-world situation?
Okay, well, imagine there's a potential collision between a satellite and a piece of space debris. AI could analyze the trajectories of both objects really quickly, assess the risk of collision, and even suggest the best way to avoid disaster, all in a matter of seconds.
Whoa.
It could even control the satellite autonomously to make those adjustments without needing a human to step in.
So it could prevent accidents in space.
Exactly.
That's huge. I mean, we rely so much on satellites for communication, navigation, all sorts of things here on Earth.
Right, and AI could help protect those systems.
And beyond just preventing accidents, could AI also help the Space Force, identify potential threats?
Oh, absolutely. It could analyze signals intelligence, track the movements of objects in space, and alert human operators to anything that seems suspicious.
So like a 204/7 watchdog scanning for danger.
Pretty much.
It sounds like AI could be a game changer for the Space Force,
Very well could.
making them more efficient, more effective, maybe even saving lives.
Hmm.
But I gotta be honest, I still can't shake this uneasy feeling about the surveillance aspect.
I get it. It's a legitimate concern
Yeah.
and not something to be dismissed. The same AI capabilities that can enhance security and efficiency can also be used for intrusive monitoring.
Right.
Like imagine a system like DeepSeek, but with access to data from space-based sensors,
Okay.
capable of tracking individuals, analyzing their movements, predicting their behavior.
Yeah, that's kind of terrifying. Like Big Brother in space.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
It really makes you think, where do we draw the line between using AI for legitimate security purposes
Mhm.
and crossing over into, like, an Orwellian nightmare?
That's the big question.
It is.
And it's a conversation we as a society really need to be having as these technologies advance. And we need to be thinking critically about the ethical implications,
And the potential for
the
abuse.
safeguards we need to put in place.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's not just on the Space Force. It goes way beyond any one organization or country. This is about the future of how humanity interacts with technology
Exactly.
and the choices we make about how to use it.
It's about finding a balance between harnessing the power of these technologies for good while also protecting our freedoms and our values.
Well, I think it's safe to say that we've uncovered more questions than answers today.
That's often the case with these complex issues.
But that's okay, because it's by asking those questions, grappling with these issues,
Yeah.
that we start to figure out the path forward.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Space Force, AI, and the wild world of speculation and claims, I'll leave you with one final thought. As we venture further into the unknown, what kind of future will we create? And what role will each of us play in shaping that future? That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.